Hey there, welcome to episode 47 of the FFS Talk audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at just before 10 a.m. on October 17, 2024, Thursday here in Vegas. Looks like summer temperatures are actually coming to an end. They will go back up to nearly 90 degrees, but it's always nice to have two digits representing the temperature, the high temperature, especially here in the desert. Could be worse. Today, we're going to be speaking about signals and systems. Hang on, I will tell you what that means. But first, I will remind you that FFS Talk is a audio program about what works, what doesn't, and what we can do about it, as has been the case for about 47 episodes at least. These are all topics that would be interesting to discuss, to argue about, to debate. So don't take what I'm saying here as a lecture. Take it as a viewpoint and one that you might share or counter. One of these days we'll have guests. Not sure which day. Who knows? By the way, if you're not familiar, FFS is an expression. Many Irish people will use it. If you don't know what it means, you need to know more Irish people or hang out with them. Try doing something that will upset them. You'll probably hear it spelled out. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you are able to locate the episode description, which will contain the show notes. I will read the summary to you, mostly because not everybody's going to go look at the show notes. The most podcast playing tools do not emphasize the text content, so it's too bad. There's also a link section. I have the two usual self-promotion links, and I have two Wikipedia links relevant for today's episode. On that note, let's get started. Summary of today's episode: if we label surveys, polls, statistics, and data in general as signals, then we can look at how these various signals drive, in any direction, our various systems on which we all rely. Yet it is more apparent than ever that neither the signals nor the systems are reliably considered. Well, that sounds very cynical. Go figure. The links for today's episode do include the shameless self-promotion via buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. I paused it there because an Amazon product took the wrong signal, took the wrong action. Should I mute that thing? I should, but I always forget. Mute as in shut off the microphone so it does not receive that signal. Buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo is a tool that I use. It has a profile that I can edit, so I use it to share links to my various projects. Those are audio programs, GitHub repositories, and whatever else comes to mind. Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo, more for announcements. And I do actually have a minor announcement that I can post on Ko-fi. Hopefully we're moving into the I can finally get websites going phase of my to-do list. What a noisy thing these Amazon products are. They're not even they're not good. They're not worth the hype, and they're certainly not worth paying extra for a subscription to AI. So yeah, buymeacoffee.com. Oh, I forgot to mention, you don't have to spend any money. So despite the name, buymeacoffee.com and ko-fi.com, both /DanHugo, you don't have to spend any money. I use them as engagement tools of sorts that I don't have to maintain. I don't have to keep a website going or write any code. I can just fill in some HTML forms, which is nice. And both of these are used by open source developers and so on as a way to reach their users. Sometimes people want to contribute money, which you certainly can, but you are not expected to. Any funds that come in through either of these platforms are used for coffee, which powers all of my projects. Now two Wikipedia links. One, signal. You can probably guess what the other one is, system. So if you go to Wikipedia and type in signal or system, or you follow these links, you will land on a page that goes into some detail. You can probably stick to the first paragraph or so just so that you have some sort of generic meaning, interpretation, and so on. A signal can be just about anything. A system can be just about anything. So I wanted to plant that seed. And as always with Wikipedia, which I do find useful, and I do link to them frequently, and I have given them money for what it's worth. A small amount, but I have thrown in my support in financial form. Over the years, I didn't donate anything this year. I probably should. But I'm giving all these plugs. It's like free exposure. The Wikipedia is, as always, a great place to begin a journey learning about something, gaining knowledge, finding out some details, but it is rarely the place where you should end that journey. So, these are interesting times. Obviously, politics is the headline topic every day of late, with various world-altering events happening in there somewhere. Probably lower on the page or below the fold. It's always more interesting to know what Donald Trump or Kamala Harris are saying. Is it? I don't know. Everything is complicated, even complex. And by the way, I've talked about this previously. Complicated can be solved. If you have a process, if you have a recipe, if you have a to-do list with 1,000 things on it, but you can do all of them, it's complicated. It's a lot of stuff to do. There are intricate steps. Some require patience or expensive parts or a special oven, whatever it is. Complex is when you're not even sure how many steps or what they are. Complex systems are all around us. The three-body problem, perhaps, complex. It's not easy to solve. Complicated problems can be solved. They just take a while. Maybe they take a certain level of expertise, knowledge, insight, access to tools, methods. Complex, not so easy. So everything is complicated, even complex, and there is only more news and opinion flying at us daily. More frequently than that, even scrolling infinitely on our mobile devices, arguably making you sad. Okay, I had to pause there and get some water. I don't know if that's going to help. We have the tools, the resources, and some people out there using those tools, resources, to create content. That is a real job title now, content creator, and I guess I am one, sort of. But are we on the consumer side, but are we on it's all about emphasis. Are we on the consumer side using any of this effectively? In other words, are we doing our part to analyze, to judge what we are hearing, what we are reading, what we are seeing? Or are we just taking it all in and accepting it as, I hate to use the F word here, fact? So first of all, signals. These are indications of status. And you can read the Wikipedia page for a little bit more in depth. You encounter signals constantly, whether it is your hunger or your sore neck, notifications on your mobile device about everything, Facebook and Instagram, hopefully more than that, maybe not even those, hopefully. Turn signals and traffic signals, it's right in the name. A knock at the door and so on. These are, somebody knocks at your door because they're either standing at your door waiting to who knows what, or maybe they've left something. Drop the package, knock on the door, on to the next one. So we all experience signals constantly, all the time. Some of them we don't know about, like, for example, inhale. That's a signal you don't ponder too often, but it's happening internally. More and more of the signals we encounter are like those notifications on your mobile device coming from somewhere else. We're not even sure, really. Who knows, right? You can figure out hunger. You can see a traffic signal. There it is. It's at an intersection that I intend to pass through, hopefully by myself, with no one coming in the perpendicular directions. Often based on events or opinions about those events that you have no direct connection to, which means you must decide how to weight those signals based on your own scheme, whether you trust the source, trust the story, trust the description of it, and so on. How often have you chosen to answer a text message or read or view an Instagram reel or something because you got a notification on your phone instead of doing something closer to home, more directly perhaps at hand? Maybe you're driving. But I had to answer this text. I totally missed that traffic signal. Whoops. As the number of signals, especially the types of signals we cannot really verify or have no direct connection with, increases, how do we decide which to pay more attention to spend any time at all considering? Some might rely more on what they know, the knock at the door, the traffic signal. These are things that you can actually investigate. These are things that are near to you. They're proximal. You can see that traffic signal. You can probably, hopefully not experience it directly, but you probably have some idea what happens if you don't take heed. Red does not mean go faster. Yellow does. I kid. Please don't do that. I'm a pedestrian. Yield to the pedestrian. You might rely more on what you know, but others might be prioritizing this sensational, I've chosen that word specifically, sensational signals that are sometimes there to steal your attention with an agenda. How do you know? It is far more valuable that you visit Instagram and view a reel and some sponsored content and some advertising and ultimately pay your attention into the money system, the revenue generation system of your social media platforms, plural, of choice. Instagram doesn't make money by sending you notifications that you don't respond to, nor does TikTok, nor do any of these tools. However, that traffic signal doesn't make any money whatsoever by telling you to not pass, hey, stop. So arguably that traffic signal is more, especially if you're driving, more important. But we often assign priority to the things that are really, when you think about it, less important. Priority inversion. I may have talked about somewhere. About those systems, a collection of things. Sometimes, and again, you can check the Wikipedia page. A collection of things, sometimes simple, often complicated, sometimes complex. They interact, they consume and produce signals, which is the way most of us interact with systems to understand what they are doing. Systems also interact with signals. Systems interact with systems, often through signaling. A button on your mobile device is a signal input. Haptic feedback, as the name implies, is a signal output to you. So you might push a button, you might touch a virtual keyboard on your screen, you get haptic feedback. So you put a signal in, you get a signal out. Most systems do things also, sometimes directly and sometimes as a side effect. So from our perspective, it might seem to be a side effect. Your own body is a system. You get that hunger signal, you eat some ice cream, and you're sated for a while. I wrote stated because I'm completely incapable of writing notes without errors. You're sated for a while, so you're satisfied. Now I'm not hungry because something is in my stomach sending that signal that you have eaten, so your brain can then get to the business of doing digestion, which you probably don't even pay attention to. You repeat that. When you're hungry, you eat ice cream. I'm all for it. Go for it. Do it. You repeat that behavior over and over again. You're not as hungry. You are sated on a regular basis. You have all 31 of your favorite flavors in your freezer. You're all good to go. And then you gain weight. Whoopsie. But while we might view that as a side effect of eating ice cream, like, what is this? I'm hungry. I need to eat ice cream. Maybe drink some soft drink of some sort, a Coke or a Mountain Dew. What is with the gaining of the weight? But that is how the system works. It is part of the system function. We just don't get or understand the signals concerning insulin and energy storage and fat cells and so on, but they're happening. So they may seem like side effects, but they're actually built into the system. And this is important to understand in general for the purposes of this audio program. I'm not going to delve into side effects too much, but do understand that what seems like a side effect may actually be a completely expected behavior or an expected outcome or a expected action, even though we're not paying attention to a signal of that, signal telling us that, hey, fat cells are being filled with those triglyceride molecules are doing their thing. All that stuff. Fat cells are full. Keep eating. So the signals are there often. We just don't know what to do with them. And that's true in general, not just about ice cream. A vehicle moves people and things. So, and sometimes it collides with things and sometimes with people, unfortunately. Remember, I'm a pedestrian, so slow it down. It has a speedometer, the vehicle does, and a horn, maybe incoming GPS and two-way cellular to your phone or more and more frequently to the vehicle itself. So it can talk to the home base. It can upload telemetry data. How fast was I traveling? There's the black box notion, which is probably not black and probably not a specific box. But just like an aircraft, your vehicle is probably recording how fast you were going and what direction, recent acceleration, traffic patterns, specific time of collision, deflection due to collision with accelerometers, all that. They can capture all kinds of the vehicle captures all sorts of information about its current state, a lot of signals that it can record, and then you get some of them, You know how fast you're going if you looked, and then what happens, what happens. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes or under the hood, in the case of your favorite vehicle, if you prefer, that we either don't know about or don't need or want to care about, right? You probably don't concern yourself too much with the head temperature of your internal combustion engine or the fuel flow rate or the charging status of your electric, your battery cells in your electric vehicle. You're not looking at the Coulomb counter value. You're not viewing maximum charge capacity as it diminishes over time, the life of your batteries. So there's a lot of stuff, and I've just barely scratched the surface. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and we just don't really think about it. P equals MV. How often do you think about that? You should. Every single moment that you are in a vehicle that is moving, or if you are near vehicles that are moving, P equals MV and F equals MA. Just keep those in mind. The days of direct connection to the wheels and no computers keeping track of all the systems for us, like my 1970 VW Bug back in the day, are largely over. Largely. Now consider this. About how many other systems out there can we make similar observation? There's a lot of stuff going on that we're just not aware of. It's either not visible, not observable, or we don't know or care to change that or to look into it. So let's talk about polling. Polling is on everybody's mind lately, whether you know it or not. If it's not on your mind, it's because you've chosen to block it out, which is probably healthy. So first of all, polling is all the rage. It's the election, national election season. Everybody's concerned that it's too close to call, as is usually the case now. I'm, if I can editorialize slightly, I'm of a mixed mind on this. I don't know that a landslide victory in a two-party system is healthy. Reagan, arguably, landslide victory. Bush 43 did okay, probably better than he should have. So, and there are occasionally landslide victories where everybody seems to be in agreement. And does this mean that everybody's really in agreement, or that one of the candidates was just not cutting it, either didn't spread their message correctly or whatever the case may be? So if polling indicates that there's such a skew towards one candidate, and again, two-party system, two candidates, but really I think it's probably normal or probably reasonable if the system about which the candidates are campaigning, that was a motorcycle, if you heard that, production by a street, about which they're campaigning, if the system is reasonably well understood, if they're tackling issues with differing opinions, then, there will be some people that agree that one has some better ideas than the other. And, two choices, assuming the two choices are reasonable, then it's not unreasonable to assume that half will go with one and half will go with the other. And that's the way it is. We'll see how that goes this year. Now, generally speaking, and by the way, these poll numbers are filling hours and hours of our signal time. I don't know if you've noticed. Generally speaking, polling means checking something, testing some condition, and often recording it. We can poll almost anything. You are polling those traffic signals as you operate a vehicle on the roadways, because while that traffic signal is a signal, it is not interactive. It is broadcasting to everyone without checking for any acknowledgement. That traffic signal has no idea if you saw it, if you're going to slow down or speed up. Traffic cameras might do that separately, but the signal itself, the red, the amber, the green, these are output only to you and to those around you. It is up to you to know if that amber light is getting old, which is funny, right? The amber light, you can sometimes look at a pedestrian crossing signal and see if there's a countdown timer, and that will give you some insight as well. Usually about a green to yellow transition, depending on the lights. But yeah, it's a crapshoot. You just got to pay attention. Crazy. We went over the different kinds of signals very, very, very briefly. Of course, it's you can get a PhD in signal analysis if you want. It is up to you to know, like I said, about the amber light. So it's up to you to understand so the amber light is an example of I'm not really sure if that amber light is going to stay amber for 10 seconds or 12 or 15. Hint, it probably depends on the speed limit and number of lanes of the street on which you are traveling and the cross street, the street that's crossing the street you're traveling on. But your mileage may vary. So what about those polling numbers? We are told daily now about polls and changes in polls. Do we have any connection to those signals, or are we simply in the way of a fire hose of poll signals flying at us? Probably the latter. Do we understand where they are coming from, what they really mean, and perhaps most interesting, are we making any judgments about those signals based on what we think we know? What do we think we know about them or about where they came from? Is the person we are listening to, which is often how we receive polling data, whether it's the person who wrote an article, the person who created a website with little graphs on it, or the person who's describing it on our favorite YouTube channel or wherever you're consuming this stuff, are they describing and interpreting these signals? Do they know what they're talking about? Are they just coming up with their own version of what this could mean? Are they actually learned in the ways of polling? Polling is kind of an art. I don't know if it's really a science. A little bit of both. How about that? And I'm not a pollster, by the way. How about that system? Polling about elections is about issues and candidates, and as important, or even more so, the voters. I mean, they're the ones answering the polls, and all of the facets of each one that can be grouped and categorized into crosstabs for yet more signaling from your favorite pundits. So there's a certain view that different ideological groups, geographical regions, gender identities, and so on, each form little systems and systems of systems, and that these polling data can be interpreted as signals of inclination concerning issues and candidates. So you can say the Hispanic vote, the black male vote, the LGBTQ plus community vote. So you can group people and make certain assumptions. They may be correct, they may be incorrect. Oftentimes they are incorrect. It's really tricky to come up with a population survey sample when the population doesn't know it's in a population or a community. So you're really looking at historical correlations when you're coming up with these crosstabs, when you're coming up with the groupings, the representation of different populations or quote-unquote communities. So maybe we find all this out at the end. So you can make a lot of judgments about the lead up, as they call it, to an election. But really what it comes down to, and even exit polling, so you stand around the polls or you reach out to people after, did you vote? Who did you vote for? Why did you vote for that person? So you can do some of that. And exit polling is usually more reliable, but not necessarily completely reliable. It really comes down to the ballots and whether there are chads. So the fun part, we're about halfway, promise. 25 minutes, about halfway, not bad. The fun part, signals can have error in them. I know that's crazy. Oh, I should point out, I got to interrupt myself here briefly. Signals and Systems was actually the name of a textbook that we used in 2 semesters of Engineering 101 at Harvey Mudd College. So Signals and Systems, the Red Oppenheim book. There are a couple of authors, but it's generally the Oppenheim book. You can get it in used bookstores, thrift shops, and so on. I looked online. I'm not going to suggest that you do that, but it is the actual name of a book because it is a book about signals and systems. So from an engineering perspective, I've got some background in this, but not in a polling. I'm not a pollster. I'm not going out there and trying to figure out what people want or need. But we all do that anyway. We just don't do it conscientiously. So something to think about. So signals can have error, incoming or outgoing. So there can be error in a signal no matter where. If you create a signal, it might have error in it. If you receive a signal, it probably has error in it. Maybe too small to worry about. Sometimes someone needs to determine what to do with that error. So does it make a difference? Can we correct for it? Do we need to correct for it? Can we accumulate the error, offset it, account for it, deal with it, and hopefully disclose it? We should tell people. And by the way, you've all heard this term. It's in the range of error. It's in the error range. So if a poll shows that each candidate is 48% to 48% with an error of 3%, plus or minus, well, that's very tricky. And what they don't tell you is the error doesn't necessarily go to the other candidate. So if one is +3 and the other one's -3, maybe. But what if you've just got unaccounted for voters? What if you've got voters that are going to end up voting for a third candidate or weren't really clear about that, or a fourth candidate, or however they end up? So the error doesn't necessarily cancel. Something to be aware of, and something they really gloss over. So case in point, the polls. Hey, did you know we're going to talk about the polls again? If the polls were wrong last time, I'm imagine air quotes around the polls because they're treated as if it's this thing we all know about. The street light on the intersection that you're passing through, the polls. These are just sources of signals that we all understand what's going on. You hit the gas when it's green and you hit the brake when it's red. It's that simple. If the polls were wrong last time, maybe we can pretend that they are wrong the same way this time and change the way we look at them. So, in the previous election, they were overperforming, or the candidate was overperforming, so they got higher poll numbers than they actually saw at the polls. I'm sorry, the election poll, the voting poll, where the ballots go. So people were indicating one thing, they actually did a different thing. And so there was one candidate that overperformed, one underperformed, and then the other good one is good, also in quotes, won the popular vote, lost the electoral college. And this is why the national polling numbers really don't mean as much unless the pollsters are massaging their poll results output to account for error or other shaping needs. Like maybe there's a underrepresentation of a particular identity group, an ethnicity, or a college degrees versus whatever it is. They may have more in one identity group than another, so they try to adjust for that. And it's an art, like I said. It's a lot of tuning based on previous polls, about often the geography is a consideration. So they'll look at the census data, the other geographical considerations, like, well, most people without college degrees in that, voting district, in that precinct, probably agree with this or that, so they can massage their incoming poll data. And then they'll generate some polling output, and then you'll see the Rasmussen poll or the Fox News poll or the, whatever it is. There's too many. I don't even know. And then you get the meta polls. So you'll get someone like Nate Silver who will gather up polls and he'll apply his own weightings based on his own experience, and he will generate his own probabilities for what the outcomes will be. And we do need to remember that Nate was doing sports handicapping and is a poker player, a gambler. So he's got a certain view about scoring and ranking and weighting data and what is a percentage chance of winning or losing and so on. And often these are glossed over again. But you said there was an 86% chance that Hillary would win. I'm making that number up. Right, but there's also a 14% chance that she will lose. That chance is not zero. So very rarely are things 100% and 0%. So those percentages are only indications. They are not solutions. So these are the sorts of things that don't always get a proper explanation, or which are properly explored, made clear. So if the pollsters are massaging the data, or if the analysis includes additional weighting and so on, we don't always know that. So there may be a completely different error. The system is much more complicated, even complex than that. And we consumers of the signals, or the resharing and interpretation of the signals, really have no idea what they're really telling us. So we get an interpretation of a sample. Maybe it's close, maybe it's not. You have heard this. The national polls do not matter due to the way a national election, that's for the president and the vice president essentially, are selected by a representative body called the Electoral College. Yet polling a random population sample is the state of the art for many, so we do it. We being them, not me, but we all participate in this. We either answer a poll or we consume the reported poll results and we compare them, and that poll is leaning towards my favorite candidate, therefore I will give it more credibility. Have you ever done that? Yet polling a random population sample is the state of the art. That's the way it is. That's what we have. So people have been using it for decades, which means they have decades and decades of data and trend lines. So, we can't completely and totally change the way we do things if we're polling companies, polling bodies. What is it? The Cook Report does their own poll and they rank chances of winning for different candidates and so on. So you've got all this data from various elections and different populations and distributions of populations and identity groups. It's hard to change all that because now, how does that data relate to any different methods? So state of the art from decades ago. We cannot possibly understand the implications of this methodology, nor can we really connect these polling results, no matter how consistent they are, to the actual outcomes until the actual outcome arrives. And then you say, this poll was pretty close, but it had the smallest error of the other polls, which were really far. You know all those things after. It would be like, of course I know what the third card in the deck is now. I only had some idea what it might be until I saw it. We are told they can make these predictions or that they're pretty accurate, but if things don't pan out, who really remembers? Except Nate Silver. Everybody hates Nate Silver. He gets the stink eye and often maligned. He's actually, I'm not necessarily a Nate Silver fan, but if you look at the methodology and the way he discloses some parts of what he's doing, he does have a certain amount of intellectual property based on his expertise and experience in these areas of polling and massaging polling data and coming up with weighted results and percentages of likelihood of outcome and so on. So, that's how you make your money. You can't necessarily be completely transparent, but what he's doing and what he is saying, he's been pretty clear about. You said it was an 86% chance, but it's still a 14% chance the other way. This is how polls really should be interpreted in many cases. So it's not an absolute, it's an indicator. These signals are not necessarily truth, but pointing toward in the general direction of an eventual truth. So he gets the stink eye, but it's a different thing. We always need to point the finger at someone. So the real signals and systems in this modern era today, right now, the systems are represented in many ways. So a system in general is a car, a phone, your home, your household, your body, your digestive system, a city, a county, a country, the planet, the climate. These are all different systems of different sizes and complexities. Climate is a complex system. Where am I? Systems are represented in many ways by our social media overlords and the user population they retain. It's very important that you stay on X, Twitter, or Facebook, Meta, or Instagram, or TikTok, or whatever. You got to stay and keep scrolling and doom scrolling, and whatever you click on and interact with, that we get that data. They analyze not only daily interactions, but by the click and page view, the likes, the views, the shares, the comments. These are all signals. Some are made public. You can sometimes see how many likes. We're thinking about hiding that data. Okay. Dislikes, we're definitely hiding that. These are all signals used literally to measure and assess each and every user. I say user, I was going to say person, but the user could be a robot or some automation, so that's tricky. You know what I mean? Each group of users, whatever that means. I want to know what people in the greater Vegas area think about a particular candidate. So you can measure interaction if you are geolocated in the greater Vegas area and you're interacting with anti one candidate, pro another candidate. If you're making comments, they can analyze the text. It's called sentiment analysis. So they can pretty much come up with indirectly with your views and opinions about political or buying decisions or general sentiment. There's all kinds of data that you're giving a lot of signals to these social media companies. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. This is just how it works. They're assessing each user in each group, and each and every thought, opinion, decision, especially about buying, each user in each group are likely to have or make either in at present, or they can make predictions. Probably first and foremost, they make predictions based on what advertisement they should show you next to maximize the time on the platform and their revenue generation, right? Because if you interact with an ad, that's probably going to make them more money. By probably, I mean definitely. How often are these the actual news reports that we see or consume, actual articles written, additional streamer and content creator amplification about how often are these about the latest Instagram post or TikTok video, and how many likes and comments, pro and con, used as signals of public opinion. So in other words, how this happens all the time. How often have you seen an article somewhere, you click on it, and it's like 250, maybe 500 words, which is ridiculous, about a tweet, which is, 288 characters now? So they make a big thing, and then they link to the tweet, and they have the actual tweet, but then they also repeat the text of the tweet in the article. Okay, get that word count. So these are amplifications of social media posts, but they're also looking at likes, like, oh, this article that was anti so-and-so is getting a lot of likes, whereas this other one, which is pro so-and-so, is getting almost nothing. So they use the likes, the reported likes, as some sort of indicator, and thus a news story or worthy of comment. And you're never really sure what's being really shown. Unfortunately, the system is not necessarily statistically sound. So we have no real idea who is seeing these various social media posts, who is taking the action to provide the signals, and what do they really mean. In other words, if one post is getting a lot of likes and another post in the opposite direction of opinion is getting very few, you're assuming, you naturally at this point, you're assuming, oh, that must be a representation of the population. No. The post with the more likes may have been shown to more people who are inclined to take that action and provide that signal. So if you show a pro, let's take probably an easy example. If you show a YouTube video or an Instagram post or anything that is pro, what's her name? If you show it to Swifties, Swifties gonna like. So Taylor may not even be, she's not publishing the item, but it may be pro Taylor Swift. The Swifties are going to be liking it. If it's anti Taylor Swift, it may not be shown to the pro Swifties, the pro Taylor Swift fans. There's a caveat there. But something that is not going to garner that kind of response might not be shown to people who will tend to respond. And so it won't get as much engagement or representation as far as signaling goes. There's a caveat that if you show a really rabid fan base anti-content commentary, they're more inclined to engage with it. They're not going to like it, obviously, but they'll post argumentation. They'll argue against in the comments, or they'll do a reaction video. They'll create some other content and then point to this other one. So it becomes a little bit more complicated when you view that kind of stuff, but it's basically who is seeing this content. Just like polling, who is answering these questions? Are you looking at people in a particular precinct, or are you performing a statewide poll, which doesn't have a direct correlation to how precincts are counted? So this is where polling and the signals that are being shown to you in aggregate, right? This is how many likes it got. Well, who saw this post? If you only show it to people who will tend to like it, you're going to get a lot of likes. If you show it to people who are not going to like it, you're going to get few likes. And if you remove the dislike button, then you don't get that additional signal. Tricky. Hint. All of these social media platforms are about revenue generation for the platform and their investors first. Electorate signals for the general public, or any skewed, biased indication of public opinion about anything, is not necessarily a primary concern. Now, they could be selling data to a campaign. That's different. More likely, they're selling an assurance that they can select populations for specific direct advertising. So they may not provide the data to a campaign. They're just saying, pay us money and we'll provide targeted ads to particular geographical, ideological, politically likely supporters or non-supporters, etc. You can do counter advertising. So they do a skewed or biased indication of public opinion. It's not a primary concern that they are providing legitimate, statistically accurate, representative data to the world. nor are any of the signals and their interpretations necessarily mathematically sound. So the data that we see may not be good. It may be okay. It might be sort of indicating, but it's like if they were your speedometer in your vehicle, they'd be saying, you're going about 40. Can you give me an exact figure? How much you got? How much money you want to pay us? This is a general concern, or should be, that the signals that we are receiving are often interpreted, massaged, tuned, adjusted to fit an agenda or support a business model and revenue generation specifically. So if I am not completely agnostic, if I'm not going into a data capture, analysis, and reporting regimen that starts from the beginning and says we're going to report exactly what we find, we're going to be transparent about what we do with the data, where it came from, how diverse our sample population is geographically, and so on. So you can be transparent about all this stuff, but if that's your intellectual property, like with Nate Silver or any polling company, that's their bread and butter, as they say. So it's like, you just got to trust us. We've been pretty close sometimes. Can you give us a mathematical breakdown? We could, but we're not going to, because that doesn't look as good for us. I'm going to fix my notes there for a second. So it's a general concern, or it should be. It often is not. No, not a conspiracy theory. This is just how it works. Raw data from direct polling. So when somebody calls you on your cell phone, which never happens anymore, used to be calling you on your, wait for it, landline, probably during dinner, and asking a question, and somebody just wants to get off the phone, so they answer your questions or they hang up on you, who knows. Direct polling, or just using likes and shares, these other signals that are available on social media that are based on skewed populations to whom, who's seeing this content, who is tending to respond. It must be aggregated and analyzed. The signals come out cleaned up, as we say, filtered, tuned, massaged, and they might be a little, but more, they might be more interpretation. They might be a little bit or more interpretation as they are published. So as they're published, they may be legitimate, here's what we found, or they may be, we tend to go a little bit positive on this one thing, and so let's couch it as though this number really means something else. So the way you present it, you can present the real number, you can present a rounded number, which is less honest, of course. So there's a lot of things that can happen between asking someone a poll question and how it gets reported in aggregate to a particular audience. If your particular audience leans one way or another politically, or any sort of ideologically motivated feeling on an issue, then you may not want to anger your viewers, or you may want to anger your viewers. Dopamine, adrenaline, all these are nice revenue generating neurochemicals. Maybe that's a conspiracy theory, but also not. We certainly get the biased reinterpretation when it comes to reporting on things we see with our lying eyes. No, he didn't say that. No, she didn't do that. That's an excerpt that was probably taken out of context. Most people don't agree. Why not leave out the interpretation and enable more direct questions and transparent responses? Yeah, why not? This is the final section. You made it. Obviously, we have the technology at this point to reach a lot of people. There's so much noise, it's hard to reach a lot of people, but you can reach a lot of people. So that you got to have other people like and share so that other people will find you. Using mobile devices in our pockets, always on connectivity, 5G and wired and Wi-Fi, internet, and so on. Automated language translation and accessibility standards for vision, hearing, and so on. So you can pretty much reach, a vast. If you're looking domestic U.S., you can reach almost, like 75% of the population, generally speaking, maybe higher. And it's just a question of actually getting in front of them so that they know you're there. But you can reach them if they have to be proactively engaged on a dial-up on their AOL account, or if they have to set up a Starlink, satellite communication platform, whatever it is. You can and that number will continue to creep up as more and more outliers. Slow or non-existent internet access is a thing that got a lot of attention with the BEAD funding and so on. So slowly but surely, America is getting more and more online. Every person has the tools in the toolbox to not only interact with polls, but to create their own polls and get them out to the world, as long as they can find you. Rather than random population sampling, which, by the way, is statistically valid almost all the time. It is completely normal to make assumptions based on a population survey. If your sample population, your survey sample, is random, to be considered a representative sample. So if you take a population of, I don't remember the numbers because I'm not really a statistician, but if you take a population of like 50,000 people in a city, if you ask like 1,200 people selected at random, so not 1,200 people in a neighborhood, 1,200 people selected at random from the 50,000 total population, and you arrive at some, 50% like this, 30% like that, 20% undecided. Okay. The error is probably, and again, you can actually come up with what the error would be based on the population size, total size, and as long as it's random, your error bars might be like 2%. The what is it you're aiming for? 1% error, 5% error. Those are basically the two based on the P factor, all that stuff. So you should be able to get within 5% pretty easily, or within 1% if you get the right number, and if you are really randomly selecting your survey population, you're really getting complete results, and if they are reasonably honest, you should be able to come pretty close to what the entire 50,000 people believes or would opine based on this survey sample. And I'm not sure if it's 1,200 or whatever it is, but the last time I even thought about this, it was about jury selection. So if you're going to perform jury selection in a given population, you can do a quick survey, and I cannot remember what the numbers are, but it's something in that order. Like if you ask hundreds or 1,000 or 1,500, whatever it is, in a typical city, you should be able to figure out what the general tenor of the city is concerning a particular upcoming court case, or what their opinions are on the generalities of whatever it is. So bottom line is statistical sampling of a random statistical sampling of a population is completely valid most of the time, except for that damn electoral college, which totally skews it, because now your vote is being grouped into voting precincts, which get grouped into other groupings, which may end up being counted as part of a electoral college delegate, or it may be all or nothing, right? So your state may be 50-50, but in which case the one vote that leans one way or another will pick all of the delegates, and each state has a different number of delegates. So merely sampling the national population without taking that into account may give you a completely useless answer. What do you got to do about that? Well, you got to massage your data. And then what? Did they massage the data? Maybe. Should we massage it some more? I don't know. So when you see your talking heads reporting on this on the news, especially, you got your, I can't remember the guy's name, totally spacing on it, but CNN, I think NBC have these super hyper, very excited about elections people that will stand in front of a big giant board, and they'll touch the different states and they'll get the breakdowns and all that. It's like, yep. We can't measure changes in opinion over time on issues, though, not with the current statistical method, because by the very nature of the random statistical method, you're asking different people. So you don't necessarily know what they felt the last time you talked to them or interacted with them. So you don't know what they thought about issues and candidates and events and so on. You can only determine what they think. Wait, we can do that. In fact, your social media platform is definitely doing that, because they can make recommendations. They can maximize their likelihood of engagement on revenue generating content that you may click on and end up buying something and so on. So they definitely want to know what your current thinking is and what you used to think about a topic, so they can feed you more of it or less of it. We need to understand what we have before us, whether we can actually observe opinion change over time with transparent questions and transparent response trends, and whether we should. There have been at least two, I know one, but I think it was two polls that really flew under the radar. They really didn't get the attention I think they should get for this election cycle in 2024, which were polls that did address the same population to get their current response to poll questions. So they have a small population. It's in the thousands, or maybe even in the under 5,000, might even be under 2,000. So it's more of a test, experiment. But they're asking the same people over time, over the course of the past couple of months. I want to say it started in the summer of 2024, but it may have started before that. The fact that people are experimenting with this is not necessarily the focus of what I'm going to say here, but it's like a seed, and you can look into that if you want. What I think, though, is that generally speaking, and national polls are tricky, but in your community, for example, in your local city, state, county, state, towns, precincts, wards, it should be relatively easy to get population sentiment trends over time by just asking the same people to reflect on how's it going. You ask your friends that all the time, right? Hey, how's it going? Oh, not bad. Oh, you sounded better last time I talked to you. We do it all the time. So why on earth are we not measuring sentiment about any number of things from the same people over time to get a sense of trends over time, what's working and what isn't? What should we do about it? Somebody should do an audio program about that. So not the audio program, somebody's already doing that, but I mean, why not have more opportunities to indicate transparently? Now, again, you're indicating these things to YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok and X, Twitter, but they get the data. This should all be sort of an open community, a population, locality question. People around you should be able to reflect on, with their views on different topics that affect them every day. And by extension, on a larger scale, so if all communities started doing that, you could say, oh, people in this community favor this choice or candidate or direction. And over time, it has increasingly moved in that direction, or now they're changing, or there's been a split, right? These would all be observable over time. It doesn't have to be non-anonymous. You can still aggregate data, but as long as the population trusts that their data is not attached to their email address or their home address, right? They're just a member of a population that happens to be in a particular locality, and you're measuring their views on specific items over time, you could actually figure out what people think, which is important, but even what impact is being felt, right? My cost of living is going up because of groceries, but not because of I don't really care about gasoline prices. I don't have a car. Other people do. So who is being impacted and by how much when it comes to cost of living increases due to inflation versus gouging? Do you understand what inflation is? Do you now understand what inflation is? There may be people who right now don't know what a tariff is or how it works mechanically. They just think it's the best thing since sliced bread as long as it has better PR. That statement was funny. But over time, if the tariffs were to be implemented by the candidate who is suggesting them, what ends up happening? Do you now understand what tariffs are? Do you think they're working? Are you seeing your cost of living go up by whatever it was, $4,000 or whatever the counter projection was? So by actually capturing trend lines from individuals, and by extension, by aggregating that data by communities, geographically proximal communities, by ideological communities, by identity communities, you would actually be able to judge how decisions are not only impacting the thoughts and hearts and minds of your electorate, of your actual community members, the people who live near you in your city and towns and so on, but you'd actually figure out what impact is having on them. Don't just tell us what you think. Tell us what's happening and what's happening now, and we can look at what was happening, what is happening, and so on. So yeah, let's do that. Why are we not doing that? And that is where signals and systems will come to an end. Do check out buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. You're under no obligation to spend any money, but you can check out my other audio programs. There are some projects going on. If you happen to listen to the Cafe Genius Impresario's audio program, I have mentioned I have two sort of on deck startup efforts. One is more active. One is on a front burner, the other one's more on a back burner. But they are focused on engagement with humans, measuring, sharing data, getting responses, and so on. Vegas is an interesting place for that, given our 40 million person visitor run rate. Every year, 40 million people pass through the greater Vegas area. Clark County has a population of approximately 2.3 or maybe 2.4 million at this point. 40 million people. That's 2 times California. That's 2 times Shenzhen, China. That's a lot of people. So a lot of diverse population representatives, different ideologies, different identities, different proclivities, different views and opinions, different thoughts and ideas, different signals. Thank you for listening as always. Until next time.